All ready for this? Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? Roll the intro. No, no, we're not set up to do an intro for this. All right, there we are. There we are. All right, I decided to do a video, and because resolution doesn't matter, so my crappy internet connection should be just fine for this. I'm doing a live stream. So if I ramble off topic or just plain mispronounce every third word, that's fine. That's fine. It's a live video log. Live video log. And since I'm talking about something in pop culture, I'm mispronouncing my words already. UNIMULTIVERSE live video log. That's what I'm calling this. But more precisely, more importantly, Star Trek versus religion. Yeah, I'm going to talk about religion. Prepare for a holy war in the comments. I'm going to talk about Star Trek. Prepare for a holy war in the comments. Yeah, from all three people that watch this. You never know, this might be one of the videos that actually gets a couple hundred views. Probably not, but what the hell? I felt like doing a video, and yeah, I'm doing it. And I'm sure what this video actually looks like is nothing like what I'm seeing on the screen right here in front of me. Because resolution, and connection speed. And amongst these empty bottles and cans of pop, and I think this thing's already out of print. The Diet Coke flavors that were extra flavored. A lime one. Lime, what is it? Lime. Ginger lime. That's the official name of it. Yeah, it was kind of good. It was good. Now it's gone. At least Coca-Cola Zero Cherry is still around. But I'm keeping my energy levels up. I'm going to ramble. I'm going to try to be coherent. Okay, that's not going to happen. But anyway, keep my caffeine levels up because it's daylight and I'm awake, and that's not a good combination for me. But I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube, and two people I watch a fair bit is Lore Reloaded and The Anti-Trekker. I should say two channels I watch because that's more the name of their channel than who they actually are. But I watched the Lore Reloaded and the Anti-Trekker a fair bit. And one of the themes that gets referenced a lot is a reference to Picard being bigoted against religious people. And so I decided to do my own rambling off the top of my head about religion in Star Trek. And I like their videos. I don't disagree with everything they said. But I wouldn't call Picard bigoted against religious people. He dislikes religion, which is fairly common in Star Trek. And a more recent video by Lore Reloaded referenced that he always thought that the dislike of religion started with the Next Generation, but when he looked at it, it wasn't necessarily like that. And I never thought of Star Trek's disliking of religion as starting with the Next Generation. I found it right from the start. But perhaps I should start with a disclaimer. Disclaimer. If you're religious, that doesn't mean I dislike you. If you're religious, that does not mean I like you. I personally am not religious. In fact, many of my friends that I've had for long periods of times, including one I've been friends with ever since elementary school, way back in the 1980s, also not religious. Considers religion incredibly unrealistic and has nothing to do with it. A friend of mine that recently died was not religious and wanted nothing to do with religion. I was friends with him since the 1990s. And in fact, there was another person we had been friends with that, since the 1980s or so. Well, in my case, I knew him since the 1980s. And, he wasn't religious, but we don't really associate with him anymore. But that has nothing to do with religion. Most of my friends were not particularly religious. Somebody else I used to associate with a fair bit and have nothing to do with now had kind of like spiritual beliefs, but found the idea of a creator God to be absurd. And two friends of mine I visited just the other day. Took a little drive, for 40 minutes and stopped and visited some friends. They don't like religion, find it ridiculous, don't believe it. But then again, there's some friends of mine that I could visit a little bit farther away than that, while they don't talk about religion a lot, they've referenced going to church. And, that statement alone should be just a hint that they're probably religious, And then there's a friend of mine technically we were co-workers dating back as far as 2002, but didn't really hang around until 2006. And we're no longer co-workers because she no longer works there, but another friend of mine, very religious. And it's like, just because somebody's religious doesn't mean I would hate them, or do hate them. But I might not particularly believe some of the things they believe. Life is more complicated than that. If you don't realize that life is more complicated than either liking or hating somebody because they are or are not religious, then the intellectual quality of this episode probably already baffles you, and you probably didn't get this far into the video, and you're already writing hate comments. Probably not, but you never know. You never know what you're going to deal with on the internet. There's some great people I've communicated with on the internet. Great people out there. But there's also some weirdos and whack jobs and just creepy people that just don't care how creepy they are. Yeah, I know you're watching. I see ya. Actually, I don't, but whatever. I'm just trying to keep my energy levels up. Caffeine helps. So I think that's a fair disclaimer. Yeah, you can believe whatever you want. Doesn't necessarily mean I hate you. Or like you, for that matter. Okay. That's a disclaimer. What else? What would be a good place to start? I referenced that I was mostly inspired by references to Picard. People on the internet referring to Picard as a bigot because of his views on religion. And I'll get to that. The question is, should I go over Star Trek, since in a timeline focusing on when it aired or when it theoretically would take place? In universe, in Star Trek, starting with Star Trek Enterprise, you have a population of people that, especially the ones on the NX-01 Enterprise, that are perfectly happy to be exposed to and learn about the beliefs of others, much of which would be classified as what they would consider to be a religion, or what we would consider to be a religion. They're very happy to encounter such things. They don't share those beliefs, and they don't seem to believe in supernatural things themselves, but they're very happy to encounter other religions. Although, at one point, when a religious group attempts to take control of the NX-01 Enterprise and use it in its own holy war, Archer, who I assume is not religious at all, has no issue with, showing the person who attempted to take over a ship was more than willing to kill the crew, and so forth. And this person who obviously has earned Archer's contempt. Archer had no issue uttering the expression, "Look at what your faith has brought you," when showing him the decimated world. Does that mean Archer hates religion? Not specifically. Is that an insult to all religion? No, definitely not. It was that guy's specific faith and how it was being implemented that destroyed the guy's world when he dumps the guy off on his home world, which is now decimated by his own religion. And it's very specific. Is the story anti-religious? Kinda. It's technically, sure. Is it something that religious people should be offended by? Depends on how easily butthurt they are, because yeah, it's an allegory about religion gone bad. It's technically the protagonists are of a secular culture. You know, the culture of the United Federation of Planets mostly is secular. Um, Battling religious people. For all intents and purposes, yeah, you could consider it anti-religion. Uh, is it an attack on anybody personally? No, but it definitely, you could call it anti-religion. But as for the crew of the Enterprise, they're generally happy to encounter new peoples, new beliefs, and learn about them, and enjoy being exposed to them. That should not be surprising. Then you have Star Trek Discovery. Cat making noises over that way, which I will now ignore. For Star Trek Discovery, if we were to say that Star Trek Discovery takes place, if anything of Star Trek Discovery takes place in the same timeline as Star Trek Enterprise and Star Trek the original series, if so, what was portrayed on the screen is not visually identifiable. I don't want to touch Star Trek Discovery. Screw that. And really, what does Star Trek Discovery stand? I'm sure they're trying to make a point, but they did it so badly. It doesn't matter. Okay, so let's go to Star Trek the original series, which we can confirm is in the same universe as Star Trek Enterprise and Star Trek The Next Generation. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot in the category of religion on the Enterprise. Vulcans have a spiritual belief of sorts. Well, they meditate. And they believe in the Katra, which is basically the data in your brain, a.k.a. a soul. It's up to you if you want to consider that religion or philosophy, that the Vulcans, their meditations and so forth. Whatever. If you've had a way to telepathically contact somebody and transfer all the data out of their information, all the information out of their brain into another receptacle for storing it and so forth, would that mean you have copied their soul? Yes, it is. Does that mean that's a religious experience? No. I mean, you're talking about data, the data that makes up your mind. No, that's under the category of science. Vulcans have their abilities for telepathy. So I don't even know how to touch that, and it doesn't say whether or not the show is for or against religion. But for all intents and purposes, most of the cultures of the Federation appear to be secular. I think there was a reference where Scotty didn't believe in religious stuff. Spock said he did not believe in angels, which was a reference to the possibility that somebody might pray or something. I forget how that works. But basically, both Scotty and Spock have made non-religious statements. There apparently is a chapel on the Enterprise where people sometimes get married, and some people say that's an indication that people are religious on the ship. No, maybe it's a possibility that some people like using a chapel for certain ceremonies that happen to overlap with religion, like marriages. Whatever, but I don't take that as much a sign. Is a hospital religious? I remember there was an episode of House where he went to the chapel in the hospital he was at. It was like a little chapel in the hospital, and he went there because it was quiet and he didn't think anybody would find him, even though he was an atheist. I mean, it does, and the idea that to me that doesn't mean anything towards religion or not. Just means they put a chapel in the starship, and while that technically means a place for people to go do religious things, I mean, some people view meditation as a religious thing, but not necessarily. I mean, to them, I got no impression that the chapel was used for Bible thumping or even anything other than just looking like what it was for the type of ceremonies they might want to have there. Yeah. But whatever. Anyway, ignoring that, then you move on to Next Generation and not even a chapel on the starship. But really, I mean, they had the holodeck, so who would care anyway? And following through that, did things get more or less religious? It was always like this general tone with Star Trek that one of the things that humanity had moved on beyond, that humanity had moved beyond was things like religion and other forms of superstition. And I know to some people it'd be insulting for me to refer to religion as superstition, but how would you describe faith? You know, I mean, people in Star Trek are obviously allowed to have all sorts of different beliefs. In Deep Space Nine, which is Next Generation era, when they encounter and deal with individual Bajorans, the average person that is a Federation citizen usually doesn't share their beliefs, but you know, they don't hold them against the Bajorans. It's just there. It's just. It just is, you know. And the Bajorans would use far more superstitious terms for describing their gods, which happen to be wormhole aliens, and then the Federation would do or say when dealing with the wormhole aliens, for example. The Bajorans view them as prophets, and people who are more secular natured would generally prefer to refer to them as wormhole aliens or some other term, maybe the Bajoran prophets or the beings in the wormhole, whatever. But, you know, it's still just a name. And it doesn't come off as though it means that the people, the humans especially, are holding on to religion. Like, it's such an awkward thing to word. Basically, you get no hint whatsoever that anything we would consider to be a contemporary religion has survived as an active belief system that people literally believe in Star Trek, with the exception of Star Trek V, but Star Trek V is outright an exception, and even in Star Trek V, they referred to those beliefs as mythology. So yeah, humanity has moved beyond just believing in things for the sake of believing in them. Which, since one of the key things about religion is you're supposed to believe it based on faith. That's basically one of the main things you're told. But then again, even the people who argue in favor of religion often will say it should be absolutely evident to you that this is true. So then again, even the faith argument kind of breaks down. That's the problem with talking about religion. Some people would say you believe it because of faith. Other people would say it's absolutely evident, the things that they believe as a religion. So even trying to use that to discuss the whole damn thing is awkward. And probably getting off track, off topic. Now the question is, how do the characters feel about religion, and what role does religion play in the mythos of Star Trek, both in the fictional world and what Star Trek is doing as its message on those many, many, many different levels. And since what I wanted to focus on was mostly going from the original series to the Next Generation, because Deep Space Nine, people say that Deep Space Nine was kind of like the one that gave religion the most positive view. It's like, no, Deep Space Nine did not have a different view on religion than Star Trek The Next Generation. It just happened that the Bajorans, their prophets, happened to be a real being that lived in a wormhole and they existed outside space and time. It was that old concept of that old science fiction chestnut, that old science fiction stereotypical trope that just is just so lovely. It actually is a good concept. That old science fiction idea that advanced beings, especially advanced aliens, will look like superior god things to more primitive beings. And the Bajorans spent most of their existence with a somewhat confused awareness of the wormhole aliens, viewed them as basically gods, referred to them as the prophets, and they were outside time, so they had prophetic powers. It just happened to be that their beliefs were based on something that actually was real. Their beliefs weren't necessarily exactly accurate, but they were fairly accurate. They're not perfect. In fact, in Deep Space Nine, very often, the religious beliefs around these timeless wormhole aliens, the prophets, often the religious beliefs around them caused trouble. In fact, a lot of conflict that existed within the stories came from those religious beliefs. If the Bajorans had just looked at the wormhole aliens as, oh, well, they're outside time, they can give us knowledge of the future. They have been giving us knowledge of the future. But they're just amazing neighbors who happen to live in that wormhole. They happen to be outside normal space-time. And they're just friendly, good neighbors who, are helpful to us. They don't mean us any harm unless we were to help the paw wraiths destroy them. Then they might get angry at us. But they're just neighbors in the multiverse of possible existing beings. They're just our friendly neighbors off in the wormhole. How can we communicate with them? If they had that just generic attitude of their neighbors, they're other beings that they might be able to learn from, that would have changed the plot quite a bit, removed a lot of conflict. It's obvious that a lot of conflict in Deep Space Nine, like personal character conflict, came from the Bajorans believing that these beings were gods. There's certain ways they should have their lives ruled by these beings, and so forth. And those problems would be solved by just, maybe we can communicate with these beings. Maybe they can give us knowledge. Nope, not saying anything today. All right, move on with our lives. If that was all there was to it, that would remove a lot of the conflict. And I'm not saying the story should have been written that way. No, that would have removed major plot points. But at no point did Deep Space Nine say everybody was better off treating the wormhole aliens like gods. That was like a major plot point. Was the problems that came from, religion. So to say Deep Space Nine was soft on religion, or Deep Space Nine had a positive view on religion, or whatever, it just had a Star Trek view of religion. You had religious characters, many of whom were good people, many of whom were bad people, and they were complicated enough to be characters in a story. And aspects of their character resulted in conflict, in plot points, story issues. So to say Deep Space Nine just had a different treatment of religion, well, it's technically accurate because it had different stories. Every story is its own treatment of a concept or an idea. So I suppose you could say it did have a different treatment of religion in that sense. But for all intents and purposes, the Star Trek attitude towards religion in Deep Space Nine was still the Star Trek attitude towards religion. Voyager, it's a little harder to pick up on. Voyager was the one, I think I heard somebody else say this, Voyager's attitude on religion was almost like listening to somebody say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. In Voyager, religion really was just another misinterpretation of science. But every now and then you'd see characters that were almost depressed or disappointed when it turned out that religion wasn't real, and even though they didn't believe it was real in the first place. Oh man, I don't want to deal with Voyager. Just don't. I mean, to get into Voyager, Voyager was basically just more weak on the subject one way or the other, both directions. It was just a little more awkward. That's a good description of Voyager. It's still Star Trek. It's just Star Trek put through a blender for network television. And the same thing goes for most of the issues that were dealt with in Voyager. So screw Voyager. I'm leaving Voyager out of this. And as for Enterprise, still to this day, my favorite television show. Enterprise doesn't really need to participate in this. Enterprise had its episode dealing with religion, and it was a great episode. But for all intents and purposes, the real difference here that I'm thinking of discussing, and I've gone on long enough that if I'm not actually discussing it yet, there's a problem. There's a problem. And I think I am discussing it. But the real issue that I'm rambling on about is the difference between the original series and Next Generation, and whether or not Picard is a big against religious people, which is something that I've seen come up a lot. I make the same statement, but I wouldn't use it as a criticism. I believe it was David Gerrold, the guy that created The Trouble with Tribbles, did a real sloppy job of writing Ghostbusters episodes, but is mostly known for writing the Tribble episode in Star Trek, the original series. That guy, isn't he wonderful? Yeah, I'm sure we're supposed to say he's wonderful because Tribbles were cool. I liked that episode. It was good. Yeah, but whatever. Anyway, David Gerrold. I have no problem with people criticizing Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry's a human being like everybody else. I just always felt like David Gerrold was full of himself. He definitely was when he wrote the episode of The Real Ghostbusters. I used to give that episode a free pass because I liked the Star Trek jokes in it. And I saw people online criticizing it as like a bad, sloppy episode. You could have other more serious episodes like J. Michael Straczynski's episode, Ragnarok and Roll. Despite the silly title, was often put up against like the Adventures in Slime and Space episode done by David Gerrold. They both had silly titles. Though Ragnarok and Roll was a pretty severe story that could have been really amazing if it had more than a half hour to play out across. And Adventures in Slime and Space was just silly and full of really bad technobabble and whatever. And like I remember like that comparison being made in like a online, like somewhere on the internet at one point. And I remember my attitude was just one of forgiving David Gerrold for that episode because it was kind of amusing and I liked the Star Trek jokes in it. And then when I saw him talking about writing the episode, I was like, no. He didn't just accidentally make bad technobabble. He basically just didn't seem to give a shit about what he was writing about. And yeah, it came off that way. So I don't have a huge amount of respect for David Gerrold, even though he did the Trouble with Tribbles episode. And yeah, that was a classic. That was a classic. So yeah, but anyway, I believe it was a quote from David Gerrold where he said Gene Roddenberry's input in Star Trek was he just came in and tried to pump out another Kirk versus God idea. And he criticized Gene Roddenberry for not having enough to do with Star Trek, that yeah, he created it, but you know what? I actually saw that a lot in Star Trek, the original series. Many plots. I'm tempted to say a third of them, but I know it's not quite a third of them. But it actually showed up in a lot more places than you'd expect. Many of the plots had a theme of humans versus religion, or often Kirk versus God. And I don't just mean that episode with Trelane. Very often, the concept was there. The emotional, spiritual, intellectual characteristics of main protagonist versus stand-in for God, religion, what people conceive God to be. That to me was one of the most noticeable and beloved, one of my favorite things about it, things within Star Trek the original series. Picard didn't really have a whole lot of time or patience or respect for religion. Yeah. But I really noticed it in the original series. Now, for me, having nostalgia for one show or another, I started watching them together. I started watching them because of Star Trek The Next Generation. It would have been in 1991. For autumn of 1991, I started buying Star Trek comics. I saw Next Generation on television, liked it, started watching more of it. I think it was fall of 91. Maybe it was early, I'm not sure. It was somewhere in 1991 anyway. I started watching Star Trek The Next Generation and liked it. Wanted to see more of it. Yeah, I think it was fall, late summer or fall, one or the other. And that also led me to check out the original series. And that showed me that Star Trek wasn't just another thing kind of like Star Wars or E.T., that Star Trek really was interesting. Star Trek really was fun to watch, fun to think about. And I fell in love with Star Trek quite quickly. The worlds that were being portrayed. And the first thing I noticed was Next Generation felt more consistent than the original series. I felt Next Generation contradicted the original series a fair bit, but I also felt the original series contradicted itself a fair bit, so I always looked at Next Generation as being a bit more canonical if I were to look at the little things that you're left assuming based on lines in the show. But even Next Generation had to be taken with a grain of salt when they would kind of rewrite some of their ideas and concepts. But I really saw a lot more of the main protagonist versus God concept in Star Trek the original series than anything else Star Trek. But this was the early 1990s. I was used to 1980s television. And I knew 1960s television was a thing of the past. And what was worse in 1980s than 1990s was censorship. And I knew if you go back, it'd get worse. Hey, at least it wasn't 1950s, but, you know. But anyway, that was the 1960s. I know that if anything to do with religion got mentioned on television, it had to be put in a positive view. Criticizing religion on television was not a good idea. You start getting people upset. Hell, I am a fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Adventures comic books. And this seems off topic, but there's a point here. Those old comics, they started off based on that absurd, goofy cartoon show that started in the 80s, which actually started off pretty good, then turned into miserable crap. Then at the very end it bounced back and was good again. But the actual people who created the original comic book that predated any of the cartoons or movies, that actual original comic book, some of the people that were involved with that, even though they weren't the main creators, got involved with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures comic book, which took on the look of the new cartoon show, was published by Archie Comics instead of Mirage Studios. And Archie Comics wanted to keep it light and goofy and bubbly, like the stupid cartoon show. But they actually took the series to darker, interesting places. You know, I'm sure Archie wasn't happy about it, but screw Archie. I mean, look at all Archie managed to do with Sonic the Hedgehog and still managed to screw that up. And Archie managed to screw up what they did with the Ninja Turtles. And what was being published by Archie through the Ninja Turtles, unless you happened across the wrong issue, it was actually some pretty interesting, dark stuff. But that said, it was very rarely sacrilegious. It very rarely insulted religion. But it sometimes would introduce religious concepts. And one thing they didn't shy away from was the letters page. And I actually got a kick out of this in the letters page. They would publish letters by religious people who were writing complaints for religious reasons. Did you expect to see that in Spider-Man? I don't know. I mean, that to me that was cool. I liked that. I liked flipping to the letters page. Bleh, mispronouncing my words. I liked flipping to the letters page and seeing somebody say, "You had an alien with 3 eyes. According to my belief, 3 eyes means it's the devil." And they're like, "No, I'm sorry to tell you that a 3-eyed alien is just a 3-eyed alien." You know, you were using references to Buddhism and other crazy New Age religions. Now, this is against Christianity. It's like, well, no, what we had was this, and this. And all of this actually predates Christianity by whatever, you know. Like, they responded to people with religious complaints. I know, I probably use the term religious people writing religious letters. You know. I mean, most people were religious, but I mean, specifically, these were people writing for religious reasons and angry at the book because it had something that offended them religiously. And I just did that lame air quote thing. Yeah. People were offended religiously for religious reasons. They were offended for religious reasons based on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic book published by Archie Comics. So take into consideration, there are people out there that, especially back then, I mean, that's quite some time ago now, but take into consideration what people get upset about. And then think of what Star Trek actually did in the 1960s. Now, let's see. What were some of the things that I've seen referenced in Star Trek that would be pro-religion? What was that chapel on the ship? You know, real cool episode. Introduced the aliens, the Romulans. Some people say it indicated that the Romulans were the first time Kirk or Spock ever heard of a cloaking device, even though Spock seemed to know a lot about the theories on how such a cloaking device should have worked. And they really just seemed surprised that the Romulans disappeared in the manner that they did. And it really didn't function like a true Romulan cloaking device yet. That actually came later in the episode where Kirk and Spock steal a cloaking device. And that same episode tended to indicate that the Romulans might not have warp drive, though they never directly said that. Some people took that away from it. But a ship I don't think would be much of a threat without warp drive. And the special effects were constantly indicating that the Enterprise was chasing them at warp. Dialogue distinctly referenced that the Romulan plasma torpedoes were chasing them at war. There's a whole lot of contradictory stuff in that episode. But it was a great episode, great story, and it was a great episode. But at one point, there were some characters going to get married, and apparently the ship has a chapel. Okay. But people take that to mean that people are generally religious in that time. Well, maybe just enough of the people to have a chapel on the ship. To me, that doesn't mean, oh, yeah, religion's okay in Star Trek because there's a chapel. Yeah, well, there's also somebody named Chapel, so fucking what? I mean, that doesn't mean much. It could be, it's Star Trek. There could be secular chapels that people go to meditate and or perform ceremonies previously done by religious groups. It's Star Trek, and at no point in time was there a talk about religion in the wedding. I always assumed that in Star Trek there were some people that were still a little bit religious, and most people just weren't. And the people that were a little bit religious didn't take it that seriously. The same way that people tend to take good luck charms now. But whatever. Okay, so there was the chapel. But I could say a similar thing about Star Trek The Next Generation. There was a first episode of the second season of Star Trek. No, actually, the second season of the the second episode of the second season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I actually forget the title of the episode, but they were dealing with Nagilum, that extra-dimensional being that just starts screwing with them and wants to learn more about their type of existence. And Nagilum, disguised as Data, asks Picard what death is, and then similar questions like that. And Picard gives a response that to me seemed as, I wouldn't go out full out and say religious, but spiritual, more spiritual than just about anything in Star Trek the original series. He responds to Data with a line that both would have criticized the people who take the Bible literally, and then lines that criticized people who were secular. He took the most two extremes, talking about almost like a Garden of Eden like heaven that some people believe you will continue to exist to in the afterlife. And then almost like a philosophically, of course in death is the point where basically you're in oblivion. You're oblivious to everything, and Picard referred to that as being snuffed out, and that if referenced that as if that meant that nothing ever valued. Like the way he words it are two extremes that would have both criticized people who took religion literally, or at least to an extreme, and criticized people of secular views. It came off as both, followed by this kind of like spiritual meaningless mush where he starts to talk about how everything must be somewhere in between and blah 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 whatever, which kind of seemed like what somebody would say if they were religious but not somebody that took the religion literal, or somebody that was really spiritual. And it just came off as verbal diarrhea to me, and not one of Picard's best moments. But there it was in Star Trek: The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 2, and there's a cat picking at... Please don't pick at the door. I'm not putting you out there now, Ben. Hey, Ben, come on the camera, Ben! You don't want to. You don't want to. You don't want to. You just want to go out into the porch. Okay. Look at the camera. Look at the camera. Yeah, I wanted to ramble about Star Trek, and I'm just rambling. Look at that, Ben. See the camera? See the camera? You don't care, do you? Okay, yeah, I just laughed in the back of your head. Okay, I'm putting you down. I'm putting you down, Ben. But if you pick at the door, I'm putting you back on camera. Yeah, don't pick at the door. I'm not letting you that. Yeah, Picard's statement. To me, that was the closest I could think of as Picard doing something truly bigoted. It was just, and it wasn't bigoted, it was just kind of like a really shitty line of dialogue. Okay, let's get back to the original series. What are two other things in the original series, other than the chapel on the ship, that made people think that it was a time of religion? Well, when Kirk did battle with Apollo, which was a very protagonist versus God kind of moment, Kirk versus God, when Kirk was going up against Apollo, he made the comment. Basically, it was a comment that very much sounded like humans had moved beyond religion. Or belief in gods. And yeah, this time I use the word gods, plural. And people want to make out like there's a big difference between polytheism and monotheism. And whatever. Excuse me. Kirk made the line, we have no more need of gods, or we no longer need gods. It was one or the other. We don't need gods anymore, was basically what I said. Followed by, the one is enough. So, the one is enough. That, to me, would tend to indicate some people still believe in a god. Not necessarily all of them, but they've... Now, some people would take that to believe, yeah, a lot of people just believe in a God. They have God, but they just don't need gods, plural, And that kind of is what he was saying. But you also have to realize what was the intent. Basically, from that line of dialogue, I would take it to mean that religion wasn't completely gone, and what religion was left, apparently, was monotheistic. And what more I would take from that is they probably felt like they had to put that line in. Like, to me, that didn't seem as pro-religion as the pro-spiritual lines I got from Picard in Season 2, Episode 2. Um, to me, I could almost picture, people in the writing room, or maybe the writer in his own mind picturing what people at the network would say, or maybe even people at the network looking at this stuff saying, all right, this line here, he says, people don't need gods anymore. People have moved on beyond the gods. You're saying people don't believe in gods anymore? Any god? People in the South will riot. People in the North will freak out. And then people in the South will riot even more. You can't say we don't need God anymore. No. He said we don't need gods anymore. Yeah. But he's not saying we still need one. It's like, well, it's Star Trek. They moved beyond that. They don't need the one. It's like, no. You can't say that. You can't say that. People will freak out. It'll be almost as bad as if Kirk kissed Uhura. Well, it's Star Trek, though. Come on, they're not going to believe in God in the future when they have all this science. No, you can't let them know the God of the gaps is going to disappear. People are going to not believe that. We're dealing with people right here and now in the 1960s. People will be pissed if he dares say anything to indicate that they're not kissing their imaginary man in the sky's ass every single moment. Well, all right, let's add a little line to that, just to make sure he's not saying that people no longer believe in Yahweh. No, you can't call him Yahweh. Most Christians don't know the name of their God. It's like, well, just have him say the one is enough. It kind of sounds like he's almost fed up. Yeah, the one is enough, Just have that in there. Will that split the difference? Will that let them think that, yeah, that's good enough? You can almost picture it, He told Apollo they didn't need to believe in gods anymore. And that one is enough. Basically, that's what you come away from it. One is enough. I forget exactly how it was worded, but you can almost picture the people involved with the writing of that episode thinking, people don't believe in gods anymore? That could get us in trouble. I mean, I read Ninja Turtle Ninja Turtle comics that had comments in the letter pages from people writing in complaining that there was a three-eyed alien. I think they were referring to Belly Bomb, who had like this big eye, and then he had two eyes on his hands, referring to a three-eyed alien as a sign of as being Satan. Anything with three eyes is Satan, or some nonsense like that. Yeah, network television is often cowardly. They want money, but they don't want to take a chance upsetting those people out there that probably actually want to be upset. So network television was not going to take a chance on a line that looked like, especially back then, that looked like people didn't believe in God anymore. That might be different now. That is a lot different now. But back then, so that line about them still having a God was basically, to me, didn't mean a whole lot. It was kind of like forced in there. Kind of like a lot of the sexist terms of the 1960s you see in Star Trek, the original series, like Kirk's attitudes at times, Pike's attitude at times. Like, a lot of it just came off as sexist. But you know what? It was for a 1960s audience. They wouldn't have noticed, you know? That line, does it mean they have religion? Yeah, you might as well take it literally to say that there's still some monotheism left. But the one is enough. That doesn't tell me that most people are religious. It just means it hasn't completely gone away. And as for the third one, this one was kind of the corniest, and the one that most strongly indicates that the characters on the Enterprise might have a reverence for religion. Okay, the third one of the three things that really made the difference, I think, would be in the episode where they find a planet and it looks like ancient Rome. And, well, it's like ancient Rome. And they have those sun worshippers. Those hippy-dippy sun worshippers that just love peace. Which actually is kind of cool. That's actually kind of cool. You know, somebody wants to worship the sun. Hey, it's a big nuclear ball in the sky, but that energy coming down to us is the basis of all life. You know, sun is good. The sun is good. Nuclear-powered life force. Well, it's not life force. It's electromagnetic activity that plants use to, you know, make life happen. Anyway, the sun worshippers. All right, at the very end, when they're talking about the sun worshippers, Uhura had been listening to the radio transmissions from down below, on that planet down below that was basically like Earth during the days of ancient Rome, except ancient Rome had become advanced enough that they had television commercials and automobiles, kind of like Earth in the 1960s. You know? And when they were talking about those sun worshippers, did you ever hear of a cult like that before? You know, wacky, you know? They were back on the ship discussing them. Then Uhura explains to them, no. The universal translator just couldn't handle it well enough. Their words are similar just like our words. That's why the universal translator didn't work for you on this one. You totally misunderstood. They're not talking about the S-U-N. They're talking about the S-O-N. It's not the sun in the sky. It's the Son of God. And it's like, yeah, even back then when I was still kind of religious, I wasn't really, like, when I was a little kid, I was told to believe the crap, and I thought it was kind of important to believe the crap. But even then, I knew that the Old Testament was nonsense. I mean, they were claiming that this magical being was the source of everything, but yet he didn't need us. Like, if they wanted to come up with a story about a complex consciousness that has ultra power over space and time itself, but doesn't need its own origin, that's some wacky bullshit. Like, even as a kid, I was like, okay, so we could believe the universe formed from, like, some ultimate natural force, like the Big Bang, you know, some sort of primal state that reality would kind of expand forward from, you know, or at least that's kind of metaphoric, but you know what I mean. Or just a consciousness that was around forever and ever and ever, always, for no reason at all, but yet an arbitrary existence that's arbitrary enough to be a consciousness. You know, to me, I wouldn't buy that as a kid. But that said, as a teenager, I still was kind of like okay with the New Testament. At certain points in my life, you know, if something was anti-religious, I'd be like, yeah, Why be anti-religious? And by the end of my teen years, I was like, oh my God, religion is crazy. But in the early teen years, when I first started watching Star Trek, I wouldn't have had anything against people believing in the Old Testament. I almost would have expected it. But at the same time, that came off as really hacky, really kind of tacky to me back then. So it's like, that was really the one thing that I would say was, in Star Trek, indicated that during the era of the original series, religion was still pretty active amongst the crew of the Enterprise, at least some of them. And at the end, you had this line where Kirk goes, imagine that. What was it he said? Ancient Rome. Yeah, I think it was. They had their Caesar and Christ. You know, like he was going on about this. You know, like he was basically amazed that, you know, they'd have 1960s technology and Roman mythology, the Roman Empire, and Christ all at the same time. You know, like what an amazing thing is going to unfold. You know, and I was like, yeah. Dark Ages, if their sun worshipping is taking over now, I guess that means they're leading into the Dark Ages. That's kind of what happened. Yeah, Christianity, you know, kicked up, spread around. Dark Ages, that's what you get, Dark Ages. Okay, granted, Constantine played a role. I know. Doesn't matter. That's how it worked. Christianity, Dark Ages. Then we kind of spend 1,000 years trying to figure out how to temper Christianity. But humanity set itself back a few thousand years worth of development. But yeah, whatever. Hey, they get to have automobiles, television, the Roman Empire, and then Christ shows up. Hopefully they handle it better than our history did. But anyway, at the end of it, that's what they say. That's why they're so peaceful and loving. They're not worshippers of the sun in the sky. They're worshiping the Son of God. That to me, at no point in my life that wouldn't have come off as being way too cheesy. Way too cheesy. And yeah, to me, that was Star Trek's religious moment. The fact that somebody actually put that line in an episode of Star Trek. But hey, indication of religious beliefs in Star Trek, the original series. And to me, that's more of an indication, even though he could have been just fascinated by the combination of things in history going on at the same time at a different point in history. That could be what Kirk was fascinated by. It didn't change the fact that Uhura was really playing up the whole thing. No, they're peaceful hippies because they're worshippers of Christ. Yeah, because religion hasn't done bad things. All right. By the way, that's not me saying that if you're religious, you have to go out and instigate the Dark Ages. That's not me saying that. I'm just saying, whether or not people were religious, they've done some pretty horrible things. And the instigation of Christianity amongst the population of planet Earth didn't really go down that smoothly. Just saying! Just kind of obvious. Unless you want to count, literally losing thousands of years of development. But, whatever. That's human history. There's more about human beings screwing ourselves up than just religion. But But yeah, to me, that was the moment where they really, really came off religious. Now, for the next generation coming off anti-religious, yeah, it's a secular humanistic future. I could mention Star Trek Five for a moment, but I don't really want to. But I will anyway. Here's one of the things that's contradictory about Star Trek Five. I mean, we're getting into territory that's about as bad as Star Trek Voyager, but not as bad as Star Trek Discovery. And you know what? I'm not going to hate on Star Trek Five just for the sake of it. I could point out all kinds of things that were really screwed up in Star Trek Five. But I don't think it's a worthless movie. Has some big problems. Star Trek 6 did better things with the characters growing old together and having that tone. But Star Trek 5 did feel like a good middle period between what they were in Star Trek 4, where they weren't completely without any trace of youth. You know, they were still, you know, they weren't that old. They didn't seem that old in Star Trek 4. And they did seem very old in Star Trek 6. So you need like a little transition between Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, and Star Trek 6, Grumpy Old Men. Star Trek 6, Grumpy Old Men is an awesome movie. Better than Star Trek 5. Not quite as good as Star Trek 4, but very few things are. But you do need kind of like an in-between period. And Star Trek 5 was that, functions as that, is incredibly screwed up, but had some great moments. In fact, if you watch Star Trek the original series, it seemed as though the main job of Dr. McCoy was creating a hostile work environment for Spock. I mean, if I went to work and started calling my coworkers a green-blooded hobgoblin, you know, I just don't think I'd be a productive member of the team, you know? I'm just saying, you know. But in Star Trek 5, it really kind of showed the dynamic a little bit differently. You get points where McCoy is getting angry at Kirk for risking his life, for asking too much of Spock, and McCoy is sympathizing with Spock. And I gotta say, having Star Trek V as part of the overall Star Trek experience makes it better because of those moments. I really like those character moments, especially when you have Kirk, Spock, and McCoy clearly having aged together quite a bit, questioning why they spend so much time together, and even shaking up the dynamic that when the situation is right, McCoy will side with Spock and criticize Kirk when arguments take place. And so, I don't know. Star Trek V, my least favorite of any movie related to Star Trek prior to Star Trek 2009, because Star Trek 2009 is completely irredeemable. Well, yeah, a couple good things about it are wrecked by just so horrible. But, you know, Star Trek V had its moments, like its character moments. But it was very screwed up. But it dealt with religion. And it dealt with religion two-sidedly. Star Trek V was the one where, well, in Star Trek V, it clearly had stated at some point that they were basically the belief of creator gods. Most of the well-known religions, most of them were generally looked back upon by advanced civilizations as mythology. It basically stated the thing that most Star Trek fans assumed based on most of what we were seeing in Star Trek, that for the most part people moved beyond religion. They didn't take religion literal, those who still had any religious belief at all, and it was just something that humanity had moved beyond. And that was basically clearly stated in Star Trek Five. I'm pretty sure. I forget how it worded, but they basically said that it was viewed as mythology. Did they word it differently? Legends, or I forget how it was worded. But it was basically said that the creator gods of the humans, the Andorians, the Vulcans, all those species had beliefs in a creator, and none of them believed it. Contemporary dogma would refer to it as mythology or something along that line. I forget. Look, doesn't matter how it was worded. It was clear. It was not something commonly believed. That said, for some reason, just taking away somebody's emotional pain got them so enamored with his cause, they were willing to believe in such a being all of a sudden, hijack a starship, and go flying through a barrier that normally destroys anything that tries to cross it. They're that close. I mean, that's the paradox there. They consider it mythology. They don't believe it. But they're so close to believing it, some guy tells you, hey, look, here's the deal. I'm going to take away your emotional pain. And then he does it. And then you're willing to follow him to meet God. You're willing to believe him that he's going to take you to hang out with God. Now, I would assume there's some sort of brainwashing going on, but the dialogue tends to contradict that. But it's gotta be brainwashing. Although, actually, I will say, as bad as that is, that it's, according to the dialogue, it wasn't really brainwashing, but it had to be. As bad as that would seem, there was a great line from Kirk. Kirk refused to have his emotional pain blocked. And one of my Star Trek V is one screwed up movie. Everything from a wacky voyage up the turbolift shaft that has way more decks than would ever fit in a starship. Like they stuck the numbering on the doors out of a starbase or something like that. To Scotty bumping his head on the corridors in a goofy slapstick moment. The people running off to meet God. But I gotta say, this is one of the best moments I thought in Star Trek. And I hate to praise Star Trek V because it's wacky. Then again, after Star Trek 2009, it looks like a masterpiece. It really was a great line when Kirk tells him that he needs his pain. That his emotional pain is part of who he is. It matters to him. He doesn't want him taking away his pain, and he's offended at the concept of somebody taking away his emotional pain. Didn't seem to match the whole concept of some guy tricking you into finding God hiding behind the intergalactic barrier near the center of the galaxy. Doesn't seem to match that situation, but it was a great line where Kirk is offended at the idea of somebody taking away his emotional pain because it's part of who he is. It's what he needs. It's part of who he has to be. So I gotta say, whenever I talk about Star Trek V, I start thinking, what a screwed up movie that was. But for as screwed up as it is, then I start thinking about those little moments that I just thought were perfect little Star Trek gems. And that one where Kirk is offended at the thought of losing his emotional pain. I don't know. To me, that's very, very special Star Trek, wrapped in a whole lot of crap. And I could compare that to Star Trek Discovery, where there's moments of almost watchable television wrapped in crap. That'd make a good comparison. Oh man, a better comparison. Star Trek V versus Star Trek 2009. Where Star Trek V has so many little screwed up things in it, and then Star Trek 2009 is just screwed up moment after screwed up moment. But then when you get to the substance of the two, they're both screwed up. But then when you look for substance, you can actually find it in Star Trek V. Just a thought, just a thought. But yeah, Star Trek V was that kind of like, it's kind of appropriate to the original series. It's like, there's a line that indicates they don't believe in God, but contradicting itself. They're so close to believing in God. You put them in a good mood and they're ready to go find God. Even if it means that it should have got them killed. But not to worry, it's not going to get them killed. But, as the fish man of Star Wars would say, it's a trap. Yep, it was a trap. Which led to another Kirk versus God moment. Yep, the gods cannot stand up to Klingon disruptors. Anyway, alright, Next Generation. Who Watches the Watchers? One of my favorite episodes. I always viewed it as one of the great moments in television. I absolutely loved that episode. It's one of the moments in Star Trek The Next Generation that I've recently seen criticized repeatedly because it makes Picard out to be bigoted against religious people. To which I would say, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Now, anyway, Who Watches the Watchers? Picard has this crusty old moment where Beverly Crusher saves the life of somebody. And this has nothing to do with religion. It's what starts the plot line to do with religion. Saves a Mintakan. They're a species very much like Vulcans, except they're not going through that whole Vulcan and Romulan crazy period. They seem to have adapted to logic very naturally. And, but they're still primitive. They're still not as advanced as Vulcans or humans or whatever. You know, their culture is still in its period of. I don't think they even have electricity yet. You know, they're in their early stages. You know, they're just not that advanced yet. But they've moved beyond belief in, you know, the supernatural. They don't have any gods. You know. So, you know, when one of them gets injured due to an accident caused by the United Federation of Planets, Picard has this little moment. Why didn't you leave him? Well, he would have died. We had to rescue him. And Picard was like, well, you can't contaminate their culture by having them know about us. And she goes, it's our fault he was injured. We got to save him. And Picard had the attitude, we should have left him to die. Because Picard is very, very, very reverent of the Prime Directive, which says you don't interfere with other cultures. And, you know, you stand back, people might be dying, but unless they're in the position to ask you for help, and unless they know of your existence as an extraterrestrial, you know, unless they're somehow capable of contacting you or knowing about you, you know, usually if they have faster than light technology, you leave them be, you don't interfere, because even helping one person in that situation could contaminate an entire culture that might not be ready to deal with you. So Picard has a very hard-line reverence for that philosophy. Whether or not you agree with it, that's fine, but that has nothing to do with whether or not he's bigoted against people for religion. Oh, excuse me. I had the burp. Okay, so there's that happens at the start. Picard does have that kind of crusty moment, which doesn't make him seem very sympathetic. Then exactly what Picard is afraid of happens. The Mintakan doesn't take well to the treatment that was being done to him, that was supposed to block his memory of seeing, you know, humans, and supposed to have kept him unconscious so he doesn't know anything of being on the Starship Enterprise. And the Mintakan goes back to his planet believing Picard was a god, which was everything Picard was worried would happen. And of course, because they had belief in gods, beings that had the type of power that they had on the Enterprise, because he believed that their advanced medical technology was actually bringing people back from the dead. They were doing amazing things. They had matter, energy, teleportation technology, all this stuff. They appeared to be gods to him, which gets back to that kind of idea that was the basis for most of Deep Space Nine. An incredibly different advanced being might appear to be a god to a more primitive group of people. And so he basically believes that Picard is one of the gods that his people used to believe in. And the others have a little trouble believing in that. That's not the sort of thing anybody would believe in anymore. But as weird things start happening, they start to buy it. And Picard is presented with the dilemma: pretending to be a god to get his people back, or trying to do as much as he can to prevent contaminating the culture, to try to get his people out of there without having these people believe in a god. Now, Picard is at this point obviously an atheist, despite the line in the second episode of the second season of Star Trek The Next Generation where Picard's all like, well, this interpretation of religion taken to the extreme is absurd, but this belief in not having that is really crazy depressing, but reality must be somewhere in between. Despite that moment, which he didn't word it quite like that, but personally, I think the absurd thing that I said in place of it is probably less obnoxious. Despite that, at this point, yeah, he seems to clearly be an atheist, and he clearly does not want to be worshipped as a god. He considers that to set those people back. He knows something of their past. He knows something of the past of populations in general. He does not want to be responsible for inflicting religion on people. And while he doesn't say it like that, that's obvious what's going on. That's obviously what the message of the story is, that to inflict religion on people is a bad thing. Picard himself does not want to contaminate that culture. He does not want to be worshipped as a god. Now, is that bigoted against religious people? It's actually a disagreement with religion. It means he doesn't like religion. He doesn't want to have others take on a religion. He considers it a bad idea, a bad thing. But seriously, if you're religious, if you have a religious belief, your religious belief probably is not that you are a god. So if you greatly believed your God is real, and that's the way things are and the way things should be, and that believing something other than that is false and wrong, would you want somebody to believe something that is false and wrong, especially if that false and wrong thing was that you were a god? Probably most religious people still would not want to be worshipped as a god. And I say that thinking, actually, there's a lot of jackasses out there, religious or otherwise, that would probably get off with a certain amount of amusement. They think I'm God. But Picard has moral standards. So he's not criticizing people for being religious, even though he hates, it's clear, he dislikes religion. He considers it an abomination that he does not want to put on those people. He doesn't outright say that, but he does not want to have a religion based around himself. But that does not mean he's bigoted against religious people. If he was bigoted against religious people, it wouldn't be that he disagrees with their belief. It wouldn't be that he believes that their belief is harmful. It would be that he thinks that those people are beneath him, or there's something wrong with those people. You can believe somebody's beliefs or opinions are wrong, or possibly even harmful. Everything from saying it's a bad idea to that's a really dangerous idea. You can have that belief about somebody else's beliefs and opinions without actually thinking that person is beneath me. Picard actually goes to those people. If he's going to contaminate that culture, he does not want to be worshipped as a god. The idea of having mythology made around him is something he finds offensive. He would rather talk to them as individuals. He is not bigoted against them. He is respecting them enough to talk to them as individuals. Basically, what he's doing is, what he's not doing is basically pretending to be Santa Claus to get them to do what they want for a good Christmas present. He's basically giving them more respect than what most parents give their children when they trick them into believing in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny, so they'll get a good present. And then they say, well, it's good for them to believe this. That's like, why? They know a lot of other things are fake and they have fun pretending with it. Why is it good for them to believe that that's actually real? Well, it gets them, makes them scared to do something wrong because then they might not get a Christmas present or an Easter present. It's like, you're manipulating people with lies. Isn't that just lovely? But what Picard does is he's not being bigoted against anybody. Although most people aren't going to be incredibly impressed by his first thought is, why did you save that person? They're like, well, it's our fault that he was injured. That was a moment where Picard, ethical standards, he should have been on board with saving the person. But that said, what he was afraid would happen is what happened. And then he had to make it right. But he wasn't going to make it right by having them believe something that was false. He wasn't going to have them basically form a religion around himself. And if human history is any good example, you can instigate dark ages with a certain amount of spiritual belief. So, having mythology built around him, he did not want that to happen to that culture. He was willing to risk his life. He was willing to die to not have that happen to another people. But that is not bigotry. Bigotry would be if he was like, well, they're less than me. They don't deserve the respect to be treated, like I can talk to them honestly. If he had done that, then that you could get some fair, you could call that some form of bigotry. But it's not. He was basically respecting the people enough to talk to them like they could understand what he was saying. And it wasn't easy because cultural differences, for all intents and purposes, they were a more primitive people. They didn't have the years of technological advancement that somebody living in the United Federation of Planets had, but that still is not bigotry. He did not look at these people and say, well, they're just a bunch of dirty Christians now. Well, screw them. He didn't do that. He went and he talked to them. He was not being bigoted, and I know I'm just rambling on that point, but it's just so absurd lately I've seen in different videos where people are referencing that as like Picard being bigoted against religious people. No, he disagrees with religion. He does not want to inflict that on people. He would rather talk to the people individually on a personal level, the people whom were starting to believe he was a god, rather than play along with the mythology. Now, if you want to take that further, the people who are calling him a bigot for not pretending to be a god, to me that kind of indicates that they're actually supporting the idea that they know that their religion is fake, that it is just pretend, and that they're offended by the idea that somebody wouldn't want to have an absurd religion being based around something that they know isn't true. I mean, if somebody, I just find that so absurd when I keep seeing that idea that Picard was being bigoted in that episode. I could see them saying he's being a crusty old asshole for saying, why'd you save him? But that's the Prime Directive talking, the Prime Directive part of Picard. That's a regular ongoing thing for the Next Generation. and a different issue. Even if somebody is religious and really truly believes their religion, if they were in Picard's position, they would not want the Mintakans to believe something that was blatantly false. And obviously that would be setting their culture back because they've gone through a change and moved beyond that type of belief. So that's basically the biggest part of this rant for me, is the idea that, one, Next Generation had become way more anti-religious than the original series. When I saw anti-religious sentiment in the original series, it's one of the things I loved about it, even though I loved the Next Generation even more. But that was not Picard being bigoted against anybody. I mean, technically, if the Christian missionaries, when they go to other lands teaching people about what they believe, if they have moral standards that they're actually teaching people what they believe, if they really believe that, then they wouldn't want to be worshipped as a god. They would be telling people about the God that they believe in and why they should believe it. If that's an actual ethical standard. Now, well, Picard's not a missionary. If somebody started to believe Picard's a god, he's not a god. So it would be dishonest for him to pretend he was one. So even somebody that wanted to promote and spread religion, if they know something's not true and they are promoting it, then obviously they don't believe in whatever they're promoting, and whatever religion might be being created as a result of this, you get a whole different standard. So to me, the idea that Picard was being bigoted by not wanting to be worshipped as a god by the Mintakans, to me that's almost like a conscious or subconscious admission that this debate is being brought about by someone who doesn't believe religion is real, but thinks we should still act as though it is, and it doesn't matter what you believe, just go with whatever religion. I know that's awkward, but it's just like, and I don't think I can say anything new about it. It's just so absurd to me to say that was like a moment of bigotry on Picard's part. For me, it's actually one of my favorite moments for the character. When something false is about to be believed about him, when a culture is about to basically fall into religion, which is something I consider pretty horrible, but even if you like religion, it's obviously not something real. That's Picard's obviously not actually a god. When he goes to these people and tries to speak to them as individuals, the culture had already been contaminated by knowing of his existence, of knowing of extraterrestrials. That had already happened. That accident had already happened. The cat was out of the bag on that one. Prime Directive not in effect anymore. Picard was not going to play God. He went down. He talked to them like individuals in the hopes that they could understand him. That is not bigotry. That is talking to somebody like a reasonable, sentient being. And I'm just repeating myself, but God damn it. I mean, how the hell could anybody call that bigotry? Disliking religion, believing it's harmful, is not the same as saying that everybody who believes it is somehow beneath you. If that were so, then technically all the missionaries that go around telling everybody it's so important to believe in religion, then maybe by them doing that, they're saying everybody that doesn't believe what they believe is beneath them. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but I suppose... No, I mean, there's no way to get around that. Disagreeing with something, considering it harmful, that's not bigotry. What would have been bigotry is if Picard had said, well, they were that easily to being tricked into believing this, Therefore, they're simpletons, and I should just do whatever stupid thing possible to get them to do what I want. If Picard had said that, that would have been bigotry. That's my rant. That's my ongoing rant. That's like, but I should move on from Who Watches the Watchers, because, damn it, I've been ranting for a long time. And there's still so much more I could say about Star Trek. And I don't think anybody's going to watch this anyway. But why not? Why not? Yeah, I mean, I got stuff I should be doing, but I got time. One thing about Next Generation I find interesting is more recently there's been a certain contempt towards the writing in the first season, often by people who really like Star Trek original series. Excuse me. When I first started watching Star Trek in 1991, well, Next Generation started in 87. So you had the 87, 88 year, 88, 89, 89 to 90. 3 seasons down, as of summer of 90. Then you have the 90 to 91 season. So you have about 4 seasons of Next Generation in reruns when the 91 season would have come on the air. And then you had, of course, the original series was 3 seasons long, a comparable amount of episodes in reruns for me to watch when I first started watching Star Trek. And if I were to pick a season that was exceptionally weak, season 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation. But I've been seeing a lot of criticism for season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation. And while I don't think it's Star Trek at its best, when I look at Star Trek The Original Series, I see a great first season. Season 2 was pretty good too, but not quite as, and then you get season 3, which just kind of, not so great. Season 3 of Star Trek The Original Series, there's 2 types of episodes in Star Trek The Original Series Season 3. 2 types of episodes. The bad ones and the empath. The Empath was really good. That was a great episode. I love that episode. That was awesome. That was awesome. Great episode. And then there's everything else. People pick on the episode Spock's brain. I mean, but, season 3, it feels kind of standard. Yeah, that still was bad. That still was pretty absurd. Oh well. So was Space Hippies and Space Gangsters. Actually, the Space Gangsters were season 2. With Star Trek The Original Series, it was like each season it went downhill a bit, but the only really bad season was season 3. And what's worse, season 2 of Next Generation or season 3 of the original series? I'd probably say season 2 of Next Generation is worse. Of course, season 2 of Next Generation has the best of both worlds. But original series season 3 has the Empath, they both have good episodes. Best of Both Worlds, I love that. Best of Both Worlds had like this creepy feeling right from the start. As soon as Q starts screwing with them, there's like a tone, both in the dialogue and the music, like the background sounds. You just have this feeling that something bad's gonna happen. And then they meet the Borg. And the Borg were creepy back then. You remember when the Borg were creepy? That was cool. Then you have Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and Part 2. And the Borg were threatening. Then you had everything after that. Yeah. Wasn't so great for the Borg after that. Some people like First Contact. I don't hate the movie. It's a fine movie. I love the stuff that went on down on the planet with Cochrane. Love that part of it. The slow Borg action of the ship being taken over. I suppose technically they're threatening. They're definitely creepy and a bit gruesome, but I don't know about that. My favorite thing about Star Trek First Contact is it was both a sequel and a prequel due to time travel, and it continues on to make Star Trek Enterprise. So many centuries, or not centuries, so many decades later, about a century later. Uh, yeah, almost a century later. Yep. But, no, I mean, actually, the next time the Borg were creepy was actually in the prequel series Enterprise. Regeneration, the episode of Enterprise, that was good. That was good. That was good stuff. The Borg were actually creepy again. They felt like a threat. The crew, I mean, we, the audience, knew what they were, but the crew didn't know what they were. And the way the crew handled them and what they had to do, and that was cool. I liked that. That was one of the 3 Borg stories I thought were legitimately good. Regeneration, Q-Who, and Best of Both Worlds. But I'm talking about comparing the original series and Next Generation, focusing on religion. And something I don't get is a lot of harsh criticism for the first season of Next Generation. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. But I felt it was pretty on par with Star Trek the original series, which also was not perfect. I view Star Trek the original series as the prototypical Star Trek. Wasn't exactly what Gene Roddenberry really wanted, but it was what he got, And with Next Generation Season 1, it felt like Star Trek the original series with different characters. It had this similar level of realism to silliness, excuse me. I actually thought they had some pretty good episodes in Season 1 of The Next Generation. Hell, I can't think of anything. Like, there were some episodes of the original series that perhaps were better, but I thought, like, it was, like, to me, a really unique Star Trek moment, even compared to later episodes of The Next Generation, when they had the crew go up against that planet that kept producing drones. Like, the population was wiped out by their own weapons, and they have, like, the holographic weapon salesman. And Riker gets trapped in a force field by a drone, and Yar and Data are like firing phasers at the drone. Like, it was like an actual kind of like action episode. It was an action episode of Star Trek, and it was interesting. And then they left Geordi in charge because Picard took his chance to go down to the planet because it was established that policy, not set in stone rule, but policy was captain stays on the ship, first officer is the one that goes down to the planet. Well, the first officer was trapped in a force field, so Picard took his chance, like, Riker can't stop me now, and Picard just goes down to the planet. And, they have that whole plot with Picard and Crusher, trapped in one place and falling down and injured and whatever. And then you have Geordi LaForge up on the planet trying to deal with the actual chief engineer at the time, trying to tell him what to do, even though he's the one that's been put in charge, and him trying to deal with that. And then he comes up with, all right, you want command of the ship? Take the saucer section, asshole. I'm taking the star drive section back to pick up the captain. I thought that was great. He didn't say it that way, but that's what he did. And he was like the probe was like cloaked and able to attack, like at a moment's notice, decloak and attack, or maybe it was able to fire while cloaked. I think it actually was. I think it had a better cloak than the Romulans have. So he took the damn ship into the atmosphere, and then they detected the drone by its wake as it was going through the atmosphere. And I just liked that episode. I thought it was a fairly decent action episode of Star Trek. And even when I watch other episodes of Star Trek, I always, when that one comes on, I always watch it. And I'm like, that was unique. I liked that episode. It wasn't as serious as Star Trek usually is, which you can also say about the original series. But, it was just, I just really liked that. That one that always stands out to me, and that was like a first season episode. But something else that kind of stood out to me was the episode, was it titled Justice? The one where they go to the planet with the Edo. The one where we're all hoping they'll kill Wesley Crusher and they don't. You remember that one? Yeah. Actually, I didn't really hate Wesley Crusher. I mean, Will Wheaton did a lot of dickish things later on, but I was kind of ambivalent to the Wesley Crusher character. I didn't hate him like most people supposedly did. But whatever. But to me, that was one of their... There was a lot of thought that really kind of went into that episode, though. And when you think about it, and it could be viewed as one of their anti-religious moments. But it wasn't full on, you're stupid for believing in religion, or only stupid people believe in religion. It was a very science fiction-y. It did involve the whole, anything more advanced than a primitive people will be viewed by the primitive people as a god. That was part of it. But it was more than that. And it was even like almost like political analysis of sort, because it dealt with authoritarianism. Because they go to the planet Edo, and it seems like basically a left-wing utopia. Everybody's happy, everything's comfortable, the people are very focused on pleasing and pleasuring each other. It looks like a utopia. It looks like progressive liberal philosophy in action. People are just generally benevolent to each other. And everybody's happy and everybody's good. And in most cases, when you look at authoritarianism, that generally, the whole right-wing harsh punishments, usually an adherence to religion and tradition, usually that sort of thing causes stress. You get violent cultures and etc. etc. Like one is kind of like good, one is like kind of bad. You go to a place like the planet Edo, you're not expecting dangerous, hardcore punishments or hardcore religion. Everybody's happy, everybody's good. It's like this progressive liberal utopia that's kind of like Star Trek. The planet of the Edo looked great. Then you discover crimes like walking on the grass or tripping and stumbling on some plants. Basic, minor, misdemeanor, mispronounced misdemeanor. Mispronouncing my words. Minor crimes, the type of crime that might not even be worth giving you a fine for, On that planet, they're all met with the same punishment. And it was part of how they organized themselves into a civilization that was so peaceful and so good, was things are starting to look a little right-wing. In fact, the kind of thing that, as indicated in the episode, normally doesn't work for most other cultures is they have a harsh-ass punishments. It's death for anything. So here we have, all of a sudden, we think, this is like this liberal, progressive utopia. Then all of a sudden we're seeing, there's death penalty for simple crimes. And we also discover that people are kind of religious. They're kind of living in fear of that God thing in the sky, So, according to the Federation law, you're supposed to respect other people's laws, prime directive and all that wonderful stuff. You're not supposed to... The law is, you don't interfere with other people's culture, and you follow their laws. Thing is, nobody would have intended somebody to get executed for tripping and stumbling onto a plant bed. But the authorities happened to be in the right place at the right time, and they caught old Wesley Crusher crashing onto some plants when he was trying to catch a ball. So, we're finally rid of Wesley. Well, we're not, but that doesn't matter. That's not the point of the episode. The point is, nobody in the United Federation of Planets, not even pronouncing that right, nobody in the United Federation of Planets would have considered that acceptable. They are a secular, humanistic, utopian civilization. They not only don't have harsh crimes, they would not consider that within the spirit of the law, that they would ever consider letting somebody die for that, you know? So they're like, we're not letting you kill him. He might be kind of annoying, and people and some of the writers are going to be like trying to get rid of him for a long time. But Gene Roddenberry wants him there, and we're not going to let you kill him. So they're going to protect Wesley, and they do, and ignoring the fact that everybody wanted Wesley Crusher dead, who was watching the episode, ignoring that fact, if it wasn't for that, we'd be saying, yeah, you don't kill somebody for that, and expecting somebody to follow those rules, not acceptable. So of course everybody'd be on board with Picard beaming up the nameless crew member who just happened to commit a crime like that by accident and taking off and getting the hell out of there. Except the Edo have the Edo Guardian, whom they view as a god and is an ultra-advanced life form that once was something kind of like the Edo, but they basically evolved. They developed better technology, and they basically became gods of their own realm. But they look back on the Edo, much like how humans might look back on a beloved pet, or perhaps a plant in the garden that they just happen to kind of care about. And they don't want this starship, full of stinky humans, screwing with the Edo, breaking their laws. But they will hold the Federation to their own laws, and the Federation's own laws are that the Federation wasn't supposed to screw with the Edo anyway, it's supposed to obey their laws. So they're like, well, we're not going to let you go. You're supposed to leave that little brat down there to die. So what you end up with is what appeared to be a very progressive liberal culture actually has some authoritarian and religious philosophy, some hardcore right-wing authoritarianism, and it surprisingly has managed to hold a balance with it, much to the surprise of the characters on the ship. But this is unacceptable. This extreme is unacceptable, and they got to try to get out of there. So they have to not only get Wesley Crusher out of there and get out of there themselves, they have to discover this thing that is like so much more advanced than them. They can't even remotely tamper with it, but the Edo consider to be a god. So they basically have to get out of there by pleading to the thing that no rule should be taken that literally, that the spirit of the rules is what counts, not the letter of the law. Thus, a very humanistic philosophy to the episode, because they only get through it by basically saying it's the spirit of the rule that counts, not the rigid letter of law. Nobody should be held to these authoritarian extremes, and just let us the hell out of here. Nobody intended for anything like this to happen. Nobody reasonable would intend for anything this extreme to happen. And to me, when I first watched it, it was just kind of like this thoughtful little story dealing with, political extremes. And it was even a weird remix, because you remix, like the Edo, they seem like this perfect progressive utopian, progressive liberal utopian environment, and then you discover that for one extreme, they also have the other extreme somehow functioning together. That's like, well, somebody broke a minor rule, we're gonna kill him. So, to me, it was just like an interesting little thought experiment, an interesting idea, and of course, they were religious, but of course, the religion was based on what was the god was basically, was the most realistic way you could come up with a god idea. It was a super ultra advanced alien that has reached the point where it's so advanced, it's basically in an interdimensional state, it's not even bound by space and time itself. Well, it might be bound by time, but some sort of causality probably going on there. But ultra advanced being. A transcendent life form of some sort. Like interesting science fiction-y thoughts and ideas in there. And I remember years later seeing an online article citing that episode as an example of how Star Trek was outrageously humanistic. Was it outrageously humanistic? Well, I just thought they were trying to make sense. But to some people, and I think this was somebody who was approaching things from a both right-wing and religious perspective. Okay, usually those are part of the same thing, usually. The stereotypical religious right-wing perspective was that this was just outrageously humanistic. And to me, it was just trying to make sense. But I just thought that was interesting, that people would look at that as outrageously humanistic. But that's what Star Trek is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a humanistic, utopian look at the future, the possibilities. It's, it's Star Trek. And that's what Star Trek is all about. And, yeah, to me, the spirit of Star Trek is basically progressive, liberal, utopia. That's basically the environment of which the people and protagonists of Star Trek are supposed to be coming from. It's a world where humanity became something decent because we just said, let's stop being horrible. And that was all part of it. In Star Trek, there's not really supposed to be like what we would generally look at. Like, very often we see religiousness and authoritarianness going together, but all that stuff is just kind of a thing of the past. And that's Star Trek, and that's Star Trek's opinion. That's very stereotypical progressive liberal opinion. It's very different than the regressive left, who are generally authoritarian and have their own various forms of bigotry, where they prejudge people in ways similar to the bigots of the past, only they just reverse the demographic, which I always thought was weird, but whatever. They didn't learn from history. They just kind of mirrored it. But yeah, so I mean, that's what Star Trek's all about. Yep. Yep. That's what I had to say about Star Trek. That was my long rambling tale of Star Trek versus religion. So is that it? That's it? That's all I have to say? Alright, bye. No, that's not how I end the video. I don't just walk away. No. I mean, I'm rambling here. No, I got nothing left to say. So, should I end the video? I mean, I don't know. I don't care. I mean, the camera's going. I got some quiet time in the house here. Nobody's watching anyway. This is YouTube, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So that rules out nudity and anything not safe for work. I never did figure out DLive for streaming. Well, actually, I think it's easy to stream to DLive. I just can't do it on this phone. Yeah, I'm doing this on a phone. Yeah, that's a phone. I'm staring at a phone right now. Yeah, if this was DLive, that would be cool. Yeah. No, that's my video. That was the whole purpose of this. It was a live video log, just what was on my mind at the time. And recently I've been watching some videos that were made a lot of reference to Star Trek and religion in Star Trek, and especially referencing Picard as though he was a bigot because he didn't want to be worshipped as a god. I mean, I'm not saying everything Picard did in that episode was perfect. I mean, I can definitely see some questionable things when he was like, why did you save him? And they're like, well, it's our fault that he was injured. It's not that Picard wants people to die. It's that Picard and the Prime Directive in general is like, well, there's somebody dying over there, but if they don't know you're a space alien, and then they, you don't contaminate their culture, like you don't interfere with their culture at all, even if that means not saving their life. You stay out of that sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, that part, Picard came off pretty crummy. But he didn't say, you should have let the Mintakan die because he believes in God. No, he didn't say that. That wasn't his reasoning. That wasn't it. But he did get upset when he discovered the Mintakans had started believing in God because of something he did. That was some heavy cultural contamination, and that was something the Mintakans had moved on from. That was something that in his culture has caused problems in the past. And on top of that, he's the God that they are worshiping. So he was so bigoted against these primitive God believers, he tried to talk to them one-on-one, like two sentient beings that are capable of communicating with each other and understanding each other. Damn it. I mean, Picard can dislike religion and still not be bigoted against religious people. I mean, I don't know. That just kind of bugged me. I mean, I don't hear when I watch the videos. I don't respond like, I can't believe they say that. But I hear it enough times, and I think to myself, I got to do a video rant sometime. I can't believe people are reacting to that way. I mean, it's like kind of like, it's just like one of those little things that I find mind blowing. It's like, what? But whatever. I mean, I'm actually not even saying that because I mentioned like it was like watching War Reloaded and the Anti-Tracker that even got me talking about this. That even made me think, I want to do a video just rambling on about religion and Star Trek. And I don't expect either one of them to actually see this. I'm just even rambling. That's the whole purpose of this. Is I had some time in the house, I could ramble, and I thought about doing a pre-recorded video, just recording a video and then editing something together, and just out of whatever thoughts came out of my mouth that I thought worked the best. And then I was like, just do a live stream. Well, actually, I tried to record a pre-recorded video, then I filled up the memory card on my camera and ran out of battery power, and I thought, this is easier. If I don't care how many words I mispronounce or how much I just trail off into other subjects. No editing, just live. A live video log. LVL, live video log. I hope LVL isn't something offensive according to the YouTube bots. It doesn't matter. It's not like they're going to monetize me anyway. The only way for me to monetize this is for me to upload it to DTube or DLive, which actually isn't a bad way to do things. If I didn't take out a Patreon, but if you want to support me, you can go on to Steam it and donate some cryptocurrency to me. Make me feel obligated to do videos talking about what you want me to talk about by sending me cryptocurrency on Steam it. Yeah, that could be my own equivalent to having a Patreon page, because I don't think I put out enough crap to just excuse me, just keep burping. I don't belch up enough crap to consider it worth the bother to do a Patreon, because I don't know, I just don't feel like making people pay for something when I'm not going to belch up enough videos to justify it. So that's hey, you want to support me wherever? Make me feel obligated to talk about what you want to by paying me off with cryptocurrency. Yeah, that'll be my monetization model. Like some people, they fund themselves in their video ramblings and video rants. Well, making money off of YouTube ads isn't what it used to be. It doesn't have a whole lot of potential, so, you know. But a lot of people go with Patreon, you know. But, one thing about Steemit is you can embed a YouTube video into a Steemit page. But you can also upload to DTube and DLive pre-recorded videos to either. That's good too. There's a lot you can do. That's my thoughts. Rather than support me on Patreon because I didn't bother to set up a Patreon account, just throw cryptocurrency at me on DLive and pick a video you want to donate a gift to, and then just kind of say what was your favorite video and what you want me to obligated to talk. Nah, I don't have time to do that anyway. Well, I suppose if people actually did that, I suppose I actually would. But I'm just rambling on about how did I even get on this subject? I don't know. I'll have to rewatch the video. I'm just rambling. I'm just rambling till my throat hurts. That's good. That's good. It's all good. Yeah. 121 minutes and 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 8 seconds. Alright, so is there anything at all I could have mentioned about Star Trek and religion? Yeah, Voyager, I found some of the Voyager episodes on the subject kind of depressing, kind of insulting to my intelligence. There's the one where Janeway goes through spiritual trials, and they're kind of like, oh, you won't be able to figure out what's going on with your scientific method, but only by going through these trials you'll learn how to save Cass, and it works, but it turns out that their scientific method was able to analyze what was going on. At the end of it, it kind of ended with that tone, like, even though Janeway was a scientist and didn't believe all that spiritual stuff, at the end of it, it had like this tone, like she was almost depressed that the spiritual aspect of it wasn't real. Kind of ended with that tone, and I'm like, why? Why? You didn't believe it in the first place. And then there's the episode where Taurus goes to hell. That one. Klingon Afterlife. She basically knows she has a vision, due to medical reasons. So she reinstigates the whole situation because, I guess, I don't know. She knew it was fake, but she didn't seem to know it was fake. I guess she thought, I don't even know if she knew, but she felt compelled to re-experience it and continue the experience. And at the end, her vision was basically telling her, well, maybe, here I am in the afterlife, but, maybe one day you'll talk to me again in real life because, this is just a dream. Didn't word it like that, but that was basically the whole thing. It was their way of saying, look, this is still Star Trek. She's not actually in the afterlife, But it just came off as lame. I just found it lame. It was like a lot of those Klingon episodes in Deep Space Nine. Like, I actually enjoyed the story arc when the Federation ended up at war with the Klingons. But then after that, there were a bunch of episodes that just focused on the Klingons. There was one episode that just focused on the Klingons. I was like, we're so depressed, we haven't won a battle in a long time. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. I'm just watching this because it's Star Trek. Normally, Star Trek Deep Space Nine is great. I think it was a Ronald D. Moore episode. Battlestar Galactica also sucked. But anyway, we're just Klingons. We're depressed because we haven't had a victory in a while. We need to win a war. I was like, oh, shut up, I'm tired of this. It was like a depressing Klingon episode. I thought to myself, well, it is a Klingon episode, so maybe we'll get to see some action, Maybe we'll get to see some disruptors and photon torpedoes firing at some Jem'Hadar ships, Maybe at least there'll be, like, some vacuous action to go with this really depressing ongoing episode. And then you finally get to this point where they're about to have a big battle. And then it cuts away after the battle is over. Fuck you, Deep Space Nine. Fuck you. Actually, Deep Space Nine is one of my favorite television shows. But people act like it was like the most perfect thing ever. And Babylon 5 can kick his ass. Now, Babylon 5 had some religious characters and some religious content. Written by an atheist, J. Michael Straczynski, perhaps one of the best writers ever. He also wrote for the Real Ghostbusters animated series. J. Michael Straczynski did one hell of a good job of making Babylon 5 an interesting TV show. And there was a lot of religion in it, too. Now, some people would say it's very pro-religious, but, well, if you're going to have religious characters in it, not every religious character is going to be a bad guy. I mean, Deep Space Nine, if you look at the message of the episodes and what was happening, religion was a problem, but that doesn't mean every religious character was a bad guy. Reality's more complex than that. So, yeah, but Babylon 5 was amazing. And actually, when they had, like, little supernatural things, like, it was kind of like a lot of them, they could be explained religiously, but at the same time, they could be explained scientifically, and it was up to you how you wanted to interpret it. Oh, the Soul Hunters! That was awesome. We're not talking Star Trek anymore, but the Soul Hunters. And here's the thing, is the Soul Hunters, they went around basically capturing people's souls, which means copying the mental information in their mind and then putting it in an object that would preserve it and allow the person who was about to die, that they sensed was about to die, and allowing that person to continue to exist forever, or at least their mind, their consciousness, allowing their ghost to continue existing. Of course, the Soul Hunters were atheists. They didn't believe in gods or religion or any of that. Which was kind of like cool. They were like dealing with souls and spirits and stuff. But they were atheists, It's kind of like obvious, but at the same time, it kind of like twists the concept around. Normally when you deal with souls and things that are spiritual, at least spiritual terms, you expect, religious. Nope. In fact, the religious people especially were particularly frightened and scared of the Soul Hunters. That was an awesome concept. Yeah, Babylon 5 was good. Yeah, Babylon 5 versus Deep Space Nine. Well, Babylon 5 technically wasn't perfect either. But god damn it, it was close. It was close. Still, I'll take Star Trek Enterprise over Babylon 5, but damn it, Babylon 5 was good. And for just 13 episodes, Crusade was pretty impressive, the Babylon 5 spinoff. Man, that was lame that they only got 13 episodes, because that was impressive. No, Babylon 5 had religion and science fiction. Now, I didn't find it all that realistic to have people that far into the future being as religious as a lot of the people were. J. Michael Straczynski kind of had the attitude, even though he doesn't believe in religion, or any religions, he's atheist and a-religious. Excuse me. His attitude was, religion's been with us for thousands of years, so it'll probably be with us for thousands more. And I thought to myself, yes and no. I mean, there's been changes to how humanity has been religious in the past and now. And if you follow through with those changes, if they continue on in the same way and continuing to change, and we're less extreme in some of the more crazy, superstitious ways we used to be crazy and superstitious about. I mean, you go back in time 100 years, some of the weird-ass superstitious things people were doing, you would think it was pretty wacky. But it's still a form of belief, It's still, even if we can write it off as superstition now, it was the kind of thing that people believed, and it involved, the supernatural concepts that kind of go with religion. So the religion of the future, I would expect, if religion stays with us into the future, it's got to change too. As the gaps get smaller, the god of the gaps is going to keep shrinking. And the same goes for, just how people handle religion, attitudes towards it. So I didn't find it particularly realistic when J. Michael Straczynski said that, religion's been with us for thousands of years, so a couple hundred years in the future we'll still have it. I didn't find that idea all that impressive or believable, but, I'm okay with it. And I really found a lot of the writing on Babylon 5, be it religious characters or secular characters, to be pretty interesting. And Babylon 5 handled a lot of supernatural concepts in science fiction-y ways, and I was pretty impressed with it. Now my sinuses are starting to seal shut. It's like they're swelling. I don't know what I'm breathing in. I just commented on how Deep Space Nine wasn't perfect. Like, some people make out like it was the perfect best thing ever. And I'm like, yeah, it was great. It was one of the best versions of Star Trek. But it's not perfect. But of my top three, you have Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek The Next Generation, and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's up there. I'm never really sure which is my second and which is my third favorite, be it Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. Yeah, they're both pretty good. My test for a successful Star Trek used to be, because I liked the original series, I considered it a success if I liked it more than the original series. So successes were Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise. And Voyager was the failure because I actually liked the original series more than Voyager. And my nose is itchy and full of nasal spray. So, there was that. Then the J.J. Abrams movies. With the J.J. Abrams movies, it's like that lowered the bar so far. It's like, after that, I was just like, oh, please, better than the J.J. Abrams movies. And actually, Star Trek Beyond, which is part of that series, I actually liked Star Trek Beyond better than the two horrible movies that came before it. I mean, with Star Trek 2009, you had magical cold time travel, used not only to start up this new timeline, which I like. I love it when time travel is used to create a parallel universe. I love those concepts. I immediately thought of all the great novels that could be written in this new timeline. But then you have, like, characters that are, like, bad, unpleasant echoes of their previous selves. And, I didn't like the characters. I mean, I like Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Uhura, Chekhov, Sulu. Great characters in Star Trek, the original series. These guys were all written like they were assholes. They just were. The only one that seemed about right was Spock. Sulu didn't seem that bad. And then there was Scotty. Scotty performed live animal experimentation on Admiral Archer's Beagle. Yeah, at this point he has a new Beagle. It's not Porthos anymore because lifespans, But live animal experimentation on a transporter experiment. He didn't do an experiment on a non-living cylinder, some sort of tricorder that could, or some sort of non-living communication badge that could, well, if it works, I'll be able to tell because we'll just triangulate wherever this thing goes. We'll set the tricorder to give off waves. Whatever. No, he did an experimentation on a live animal. And of course it was the Admiral's dog. Genius there, yeah. You put. No, I mean that's just wrong. It's like, no, don't. He's a jackass who did live animal experimentation. Yeah, it was with a transporter, but it was still experimentation. Damn it, that's just not right. But that's Scotty. Not the old Scotty. New Scotty from the Bizarro universe. I'm reminded of a novel, Star Trek Killing Time, where the timeline had been changed so many times, so many times, I'm not saying my words right, where the timeline had been changed so many times that people were going insane, and it was just having like a weird effect on the space-time continuum itself and the psychology of people and all that wonderful stuff. Yep. Yeah, because in that movie, in addition to making Kirk a complete jackass, they have that whole scene where instead of throwing him in the brig, they throw him in an escape pod and maroon him on Hoth. Might as well call it Hoth, which somehow was close enough to planet Vulcan that from there somebody was able to witness planet Vulcan being destroyed. But yet they traveled at warp. They were traveling at warp when they dropped him off. They were already traveling at warp when they dropped him off, I'm pretty sure. But yet close enough to watch Vulcan being destroyed. Fuck. Then he's like, they didn't put him in the brig. They just dumped him on the fucking planet. I mean, that's absurd in and of itself. And then he's like, he gets out, he ends up running from one space monster, and then he happens across another space monster, which grabs that space monster and throws it away. And when the damn annoying scene finally got over, when he just happened across old Spock from the original universe, just happened across him. Bro, we just happened to be on this planet. Happened to be close enough to just one of us just run into each other. Just run right the fuck into the person that's gonna save the universe. Yeah, that's good writing. Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose maybe they both landed somewhere relatively close to that outpost for reasons of, maybe they should be close to like the outpost where they find the third person that they need to save the universe. Fuck, I mean, you use coincidence as a plot point in that way. You might as well just say, yes, the story we're writing, we're making sure you know it should not happen. It's like, what was the, like, why did that scene have to go on when he's running from the stupid space monster just to have a different space monster chase him? It's like, that wasn't fun to watch. That was tedious. And then Spock just chases it off with a torch. Good thing that thing knows what fire looks like. It surely would have a strong instinct to avoid fire. Its ancestors were probably killed by a lot of fire on an ice world. I don't know, maybe it was just so alien to it freaked it out. I don't know. It's just so stupid. And then old Spock didn't go with them, because if old Spock had went with them, the plot would have went too easily. Yeah, get a notification. Whatever. Anyway, if old Spock had gone with him, he could have told young Spock, it's like, here's what's going on, and I'm the proof. But no, he wanted Kirk and Spock in that timeline to become friends naturally, without his interference, because reasons. And then Kirk, who was like flunking out of Starfleet Academy, he did successfully save Earth. Yeah, I know Vulcan was destroyed, but fuck them, because they're not Earth. He did manage to stop the bad guy, so he was good at fighting the bad guy, but he also was about to flunk out of the academy, so surely him saving the Earth would give them a reason not to flunk him out of the academy and another chance to gain the experience needed to one day be an officer in Starfleet. Oh, no, don't even need to do that. No, we'll just promote him to captain. We'll put him in charge of this big-ass starship, antimatter reactor, phasers, photon torpedoes. He's ready to handle that. Flunking out of Starfleet Academy, on the verge of that. Don't worry about that. The fuck was wrong with the people when they wrote that? And then they were going to be sucked into a black hole. But the warp drive wasn't powerful enough to overpower the black hole. The warp drive. You fall into a black hole because you can't go faster than the speed of light to get away from it. So they used the warp drive to try to get away from it, because it's a faster than light drive. But the black hole, the power of the black hole is still pulling them in. They're not crossed the event horizon yet, but still pulling them in at warp speed. Their warp engine's just working as hard as it can, but it can't get them away from the black hole. So what do? They eject the warp core and blow it up and ride the explosion. Because, if a warp core can't get away from a black hole, a nuclear bomb's going to do it. It's not nuclear, it's antimatter, but it works the same fucking way when you think about matter being turned into energy. Just ride the shockwave away from the black hole. Why? Why did they? Why? Why? Why would they write that? Why? It's like they just wanted to have them fly out of the fireball. You know, like that trope in a movie where something's going to explode and people are running and they're jumping with a fireball behind them. You know, there's an explosion behind them. They just wanted to have the ship flying with an explosion behind it. The hell? I mean, that's it's just so stupid. It's just so stupid. At least the next movie couldn't be as stupid. The next movie was full of stupid, but it wasn't that stupid. At least I kind of thought. I was like, well, as bad as Star Trek Into Darkness is, at least it's not as bad as the last one. Then they resurrect somebody with Khan's blood. They use Khan's blood as resurrection juice. This is that's like, why do they feel the need to be that stupid? Why would anybody write that? And, you know, if somebody wanted, why would they write that and then decide it was good enough to go into a movie? Well, I suppose it made lots of money. And at the time, those stupid-ass Transformers movies were making lots of money, so why not? Why not be as dumb as Transformers? Damn it, JJ. Just so horrible. Just so damn horrible. There's nothing left. There's nothing left in this thing. At least Star Trek Beyond was watchable. Beyond was okay. Discovery was pretty bad, but compared to Star Trek 2009, it was gold compared to Star Trek 2009, gold compared to that. Crap compared to Voyager. The old standards of, you know, well, Voyager was kind of disappointing for just being another generic episode where nothing special happened, and, you know, that seemed like an absurd usage of this technobabble, but you know what, it kind of worked as a passable plot. It was good enough that I could sit down and watch it, but I'm just watching it because it's Star Trek. You know, that standard that I watched Voyager with, all of a sudden it's like Voyager suddenly seems beautiful compared to how bad Star Trek Discovery was. I mean, it was watchable. I mean, I watched episodes and got some enjoyment out of it. So maybe it is better than Star Trek 2009, but there's just so many points where I'm like, that's just stupid. That's just unpleasant plot points. Just bad. It's just bad. I guess I all Star Trek'd out. I'm all Star Trek'd out. I have anything left in here. I have this dented can of Big 8. This can is dented. Dented can of Big 8. Didn't even open right. Well. This can is dented, deformed, and just a mere shell of its former self. It's still in better shape than what Star Trek has been in since 2009. Get that open more so it'll maybe like that. Anyway, so that's me rambling about Star Trek. You know, an odd thing about Star Trek Deep Space Nine is I actually saw in an interview where they discussed how they were trying to subvert expectations. I didn't use that word though. That's something that people joke about Rian Johnson doing with Star Wars Episode 8. I mean, I wasn't that surprised Episode 8 was horrible. Episode 7 was pretty bad. I kind of watched Episode 7 and I thought to myself, well, at least I like it better than Episode 1. And then I realized, well, as bad as I thought Episode 1 was, I find Episode 1 easier to get through. Even if Episode 1 was goofier. But both Star Trek 2009 and Star Wars Episode 7 were bad rip-offs of Star Wars Episode 4. And Star Wars Episode 4 was just great. That was one of the best Star Wars movies. As far as I'm concerned, Star Wars is best in the form of video games, novels, and comic books. But both Star Wars Episodes 3 and 4 were great. There we go. Come on. There we go. Gonna milk you like the weird booby monster from Episode 8. Come on, get out of there. Squeeze some Big 8 out of this can. There we go, making a mess. Yeah, this is epic. This is epic. This is just like Luke Skywalker drinking alien booby juice. Yeah. This is epic. This is epic. This is epic. Yeah, we're wiping up cola. Diet cola. Anyway, what am I rambling about now? Let's see. Star Trek went down the toilet. Star Wars went down the toilet. Star Trek always was anti-religious, but just like George Carlin, that's one of the things that just made it special, you know. Yeah, I get quiet time here, the camera's on. But yeah, it's kind of like I probably should end the video soon. I mean, why not? Why not? Why not end the video? I mean, what could have been more epic than watching me squeeze cola out of a deformed pop can? But really, isn't that what YouTube is all about? Actually, now it's all about watching episodes of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, because YouTube is all about content creators like CBS and NBC and whatever. Yep, that's yeah. And like I said, I'm live streaming this to YouTube, and yeah, maybe I'll upload a version of it to DTube or DLive sometime in the future. And I didn't go for Patreon. I didn't create a Patreon account, so people on. But if anybody wants to send me a gift on DLive, I suppose that would be a way that could support the channel. That's something I just kind of rambled about and joked about a few minutes ago, but that's actually not a bad idea. This and other videos, I'll probably, well, I don't have to upload this to YouTube. This is going to YouTube right now at really high resolution. In fact, by the way, I'm not YouTube for this. I'm not really even blaming my cell phone for this. I think it's my internet connection. I'm fairly sure that whatever resolution this is being recorded at or being streamed to YouTube at, I'm probably pretty pixelated right now. I'm thinking you can tell that I have a Ghostbusters shirt on, but I've seen how the quality of this stuff tends to stream with. So I'm not even sure that's gonna happen. Yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious. So I think I got enough resolution for that. But I remember there was like one time it was like things were like changing color in the background because not enough detail was going through, and oh, excuse me. I think that's actually to do with my internet connection and how YouTube probably handles absurdly bad internet connections. Yeah. Did I just notice something change with this? What's going on with this? I don't know, maybe it's just taking a stroke. Maybe that's why it suddenly looked different. Because actually the screen here, the way it looks here, is actually perfect resolution. It's what it looks like when I play it back on YouTube. That's not going to be perfect. Oh yeah, so anyway, you can look for more videos. Yeah, I'm getting to the point. I gotta just end this. Look for more videos on YouTube and DTube and DLive and Steam it, whatever. There's no censorship on Steam it or any of the things connected with Steam it, like DTube and DLive, so DPorn. So you never know what I'm gonna do there. So you might not wanna check that out. Might be too much, Might be too much. Might just want to check me out here on YouTube where I'm censored, because who knows what I'm liable to do. Actually, I know what I'm liable to do, and it's probably a bad idea, but I'm doing it anyway. Yeah. Hey, there's another cat. Yeah, that's an excuse to keep the video going for just a little bit longer. Look, there's a cat. Look, there's a cat. Hey, Piper, you see yourself on the camera? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Piper had things to do, and that was not one of them. I think I was trying to end this video and not doing it. I was trying to bring this video to an end and not doing it. So which would have been a great time for my internet connection to just have crashed. But it didn't. I'm still here. And this is the kitchen. This is some empty cans of Diet Coke. That's green. Green can of Diet Coke because it's a ginger lime flavor. My now empty box of beer paws. Yeah. No, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just killing time. But look, we're talking about Star Trek. Captain Crunch is going on a space adventure right there. Right there. All right, I better end this for real. I mean, I'm running out of my level of absurdity is getting even worse. Hey, change the lighting here a little bit. Yeah. How bad's that? All right. How's that for lighting? Yeah. That's actually pretty bright. That can get hard on the eyes. Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop for real this time. I mean, I had stuff to do. I mean, I was going to get some stuff done to my car. And I mean, not today. Oh, I got to clear out my car. Yeah, I'm still rambling. I mean, I've totally flipped the script at this point. I mean, I was going to ramble on about, Star Trek and religion, and the fact I've seen a lot of videos recently, talking about that, and so I just wanted to ramble on about Star Trek and religion, and that I think it's absurd to say Picard is, hey, did this freeze? Did this end? I'm frozen. I'm frozen on the screen. Am I moving on the video? Well, nobody's watching anyway. The timer's still ticking. That's interesting. Well, I'm just gonna stand here and... Hello, camera, phone, whatever. Okay. Yeah. I don't really know how well this is working anymore. So if I'm frozen on the screen, in the off chance you're still listening to me, thanks for watching. I was going to end this anyway. Maybe I'm still moving. Maybe you can still see me move. I wonder. I was frozen on the screen here. I don't know if the rest of the world could still see me move, but now I'm moving. Wow. That is not interesting. That is not interesting at all. But here I am talking about it. But that's what I do. That's what I do. And now I'm going to end the video. So I suppose if this is on YouTube, I suppose I could have boxes appear. Ooh, excuse me. I could have boxes appear here and there and over there and there. Maybe something for subscribing. Some other videos to check out. And if I ever upload a copy of this to DTube, I'm just pointing at nothing, and because DTube doesn't have that option yet, because DTube hasn't been around as long as YouTube, and it's a constant state of development. Same goes for DLive. I don't know if they're going to have that feature or not. I mean, for a few times I could have even up here in the corner had like some sort of little tab thing show up with links to other stuff as well too, but I don't know. If the video is just about over, there's probably not much point in that. More so time for like a box to appear somewhere around here sometime soon, and around here. Maybe an option to subscribe, because subscribing to small channels like mine is just a good idea. It helps YouTube acknowledge them. Though supporting channels like mine mostly helps if you upvote me on Steemit, DLive, DTube. D-porn, you know, because with Steemit, with the things attached to Steemit, you know, there's no censorship. There's no censorship. I mean, there's a warning if it's not safe for work. You know, just about anything could happen. And yeah, but yeah, I've been rambling on enough. Time for this to end for real. Yeah, ending it for real. Almost there. Almost did it. Almost did it. Almost bringing it to an end. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for real. No, I'm not. Yeah, well, thanks for watching. Feel free to check out more of my videos, you know, YouTube, DTube, DLive, wherever. Did it stop? No, it didn't stop. All right, there we go. Yeah. Am I sure I want to stop streaming? The message says. Is anybody still watching this? Am I still streaming while it's asking me the question? One would assume so. All right, feel free to check out more of my videos, because I am going to press end